Monster Hunter World provides hunters with numerous tools and weapons to take on the beasts that roam the world. With each weapon comes a unique set of moves and mechanics that a hunter must master. With training and knowledge of these, a hunter can decimate the monstrous foes that lie in their way. I'm Darcblade, and in this video we're going to bring you a hunter's guide to the Gunlance. The Gunlance is a weapon that resembles a firearm combined with a lance or large bayonet, although it doesn't function like the other ranged weapons in the game like the bowguns. Instead, it is a pure melee weapon that can make use of close range artillery. This gives the Gunlance strong offensive capabilities, and that is also combined with strong defensive capabilities thanks to the large shield it carries. However, Gunlance users will have to sacrifice mobility in order to utilise the strong offense and defense aspects of this weapon. Gunlancers will have two resources to manage. They have their shells to manage, which dictate their shelling attacks, and they have their WYRMSTAKE cannon gauge, which dictates when they can and can't use the WYRMSTAKE cannon ability. This, combined with the Wyvern's fire, hard-hitting move, means that the damage output with the Gunlance is quite high. On top of that, the large shield they carry for defense is no joke. They're able to block most monsters' attacks, which adds to your hunter's survivability. All of this combines into a weapon that, if used correctly, can take down monsters very quickly. But anyway, let's move on to talk about the basic moves of the Gunlance. The Gunlance comes with quite a few basic moves. The first is a lunging up thrust, which is done from either a draw attack by forward and triangle, or by just pressing forward and triangle with your weapon already out. This is a decent move to utilise if you find that you're actually quite a distance away from a monster, as it does move you quickly forward. Next is the lateral thrusts. Now there are 3 of these, and akin to the lance's thrust, they're all followed after one another. So you'll have lateral thrust 1, then 2, then 3. This is done by pressing triangle, then triangle, then triangle. Now these all have to be followed up after one another, although you can go into the lateral thrust 1 from other moves, such as the lunging up thrust. Next is the rising slash, which is done with the weapon drawn or following a lateral thrust by pressing triangle and circle. This will cause your hunter to thrust up with the lance portion of the Gunlance. Next is overhead smash, which is done either following a rising slash by pressing triangle or following a quick reload, as well as a lunging up thrust by pressing triangle and circle. This is quite a high damaging normal move for the Gunlance, and it's used in a lot of their combos. Next is wide sweep, which is done following an overhead smash by pressing triangle again, or by following a burst fire by pressing triangle, or by following a jumping reload smash attack by pressing triangle again. Wide sweep is also another hard hitting normal move for the Gunlance, and again it's used in a lot of their combos. Next is the shell attack, which is done by pressing circle. This will cause you to consume one of your shells indicated in the top left of your screen underneath your stamina and health. Now shelling is useful because it will basically reset a combo, so you could do a lateral thrust combo, end it with a shelling attack, and then immediately go back into another lateral thrust combo. But we'll talk about that more in the combo section. Next is the charge shell attack, which is done by holding circle mid combo. This is like a normal shelling attack, although it allows you to charge it up, increasing its damage. Whilst charging as well, you can also aim the charged shell by moving the left stick. Next is burst fire. This is done in 2 ways, either following an overhead smash by pressing circle, or by pressing circle following a jumping reload smash. Now a burst fire will consume all shells you have indicated in your gauge, but this means that all of these shells will be hitting at once, making burst fire quite a high damaging move. Next is the WYRMSTAKE, which is done in multiple ways. It can either be done following 2 consecutive shells, so that would be circle, circle, and then you press circle a 3rd time to land the WYRMSTAKE. You can press circle following a burst fire to commit to performing the WYRMSTAKE again, or you can press either triangle or circle following a wide sweep or aerial burst to again go into the WYRMSTAKE cannon. Now the WYRMSTAKE has 2 parts to it. First is a thrusting attack where the stake comes out. Afterwards, the stake will lodge itself in its target, hitting multiple times before exploding. However, this will use up your WYVERN'S gauge indicated in the top left again, near your shelling gauge. Next is guard, which is done by holding R2. This will cause you to raise your shield, allowing you to block a monster's attack. Whilst you'll still take a tiny bit of chip damage, you'll be able to block an attack so long as you have stamina. Now whilst holding R2, you can follow the guard up with other moves. You have the ability to guard thrust. This can be done up to 3 times by holding R2 and then pressing triangle. Whilst guarding as well, you can also perform the Wyvern fire, which is done by guarding, so holding R2 and then pressing triangle and circle. This will cause the Gunlance to charge up and eventually explode, causing high amounts of damage to the monster in front of you. Now individually this isn't the strongest hit, but because it hits multiple times, the damage does mount up. Unfortunately though, there is an internal cooldown indicated by the barrel of your Gunlance glowing red after using the Wyvern's fire. You won't be able to use it again until that barrel has cooled down and the Gunlance has gone back to its normal colour. Also, when you're committing to the Wyvern's fire, you cannot move, although you can still aim the shot. Anyway, next is the step moves, which are done by pressing X. This will cause you to hop backwards, and it can branch out into alternative steps. For example, you have the back step, which is done mid-combo by just simply pressing X. This will cause you to hop backwards again. You have the back step long version, which is done by holding back and X mid-combo. This will cause you to go backwards a longer distance. You have the forward step, which is done by pressing forward and X either on the spot or mid-combo. You have side step, which is mid-combo by pressing left or right and X. Unfortunately, all of these step moves do consume stamina, but nonetheless they can be helpful for counteracting the slow movement of the Gunlance. Next is the reload move, which is done by pressing R2 in circle. This will cause you to reload both your shells and your WYRMSTAKE gauges. However, there are multiple versions of the quick reload. Now the quick reload is basically done mid-combo by pressing R2 in circle. Now this will cause your hunter to reload the shell gauge, but not the WYRMSTAKE gauge. Nonetheless, the quick reload can come in useful as it resets combos, so you'll find yourself using it a lot in the higher damaging combos for the Gunlance. But anyway, let's move on to talk about the mechanics of the Gunlance. Now the Gunlance is a unique weapon as it doesn't really function like other ones. It has multiple gauges you have to monitor and keep an eye on when using the weapon. The first mechanic you'll have to get used to is shelling. Now, shelling is the term for actually firing the Gunlance, and whilst the weapon isn't a ranged weapon per se, it allows you to attack monsters that are not right in front of you. Whilst yes, melee range is still needed, it means that you don't have to be touching a monster for your shells to hit. Your shell gauge is indicated in the top left of your screen next to your sharpness gauge, and this indicates how many, bullets the Gunlance has before it needs reloading. Now depending on what Gunlance you have, the magazine size can differ. Nonetheless, when using a shelling attack, one of the shells in the magazine will be consumed until you run out and have to reload. Now one of the benefits of shelling attacks is that it deals fixed damage, so you don't have to worry about the shot bouncing off a monster's hide or doing reduced damage if the monster has higher defenses in a certain body part. However, attacks that do fixed damage are not affected by modifiers such as affinity and such, so that's also something to be aware of. Now whilst this is all good, it will eat through your weapon's sharpness quite quickly, a lot quicker than your normal attacks. Now your shelling attacks will be affected by the shelling level indicated on what Gunlance you've crafted, so this is something to be considerate of, especially if you want to utilise shelling attacks. So basically the higher the level, the stronger shelling attacks that specific Gunlance will have. Additionally as well, you can charge your shelling attacks up to increase their damage. Now depending on what type of Gunlance you've chosen, whether it be normal shells, long shells or spread shells, the damage modifier will change, with long being the highest, normal shells being in the middle and wide shells having the least damage bonus. But anyway, the other mechanic is your shell types. Now when you're crafting your Gunlance, you'll notice that the different Gunlances have different shell types, normal, long and wide. But what do they mean? Well, these all indicate the fire pattern of your Gunlance. Normal means that they're pretty standard, they normally come with the highest magazine sizes and they're pretty straightforward. Long come with a little bit more of a reduced magazine size but have a longer reach to the shelling attacks. And wide normally come with the smallest magazine sizes but the shells will do the most damage. It also has a shorter but wider arc when firing, so take this into account when you're deciding on what Gunlance to craft. The next mechanic is burst fire. Now when performing an overhead smash, you can go into the burst fire shot, which will consume all of your shells at once in return for all of their damage at once. Now this normally works well with high magazine size Gunlances, as you'll be able to get that 5 or 6 shells off all at the same time, which really does rack up the damage. Next mechanic is Wyvern fire. This is a move done whilst blocking and then pressing triangle in circle. This causes your weapon to charge up, eventually releasing a huge burst that will hit the monster multiple times, and all of these added up together will deal quite a bit of damage. Unfortunately, this move is best used on trapped monsters as it does have a long cooldown and it's not always safe to use it mid-fight. Once used, as I said, the top of your gun, normally the barrel of the Gunlance, will be glowing orange or red, indicating that you can't use Wyvern's fire until this is returned to normal colour. But like I said, it's not the safest move to use mid-fight, so the cooldown time is not always a bad thing. Anyway, the last mechanic is the WYRMSTAKE. This is indicated underneath your sharpness gauge in the top left of the screen. Now this is another resource that the Gunlance users have available to them. Basically at the end of certain combo strings, you're allowed to fire off the WYRMSTAKE. This will cause you to thrust forward with the Gunlance, thrusting into your target or into a monster, and then the WYRMSTAKE will fire out into the monster. You'll then pull the Gunlance back, but the stake will remain there, hitting your target multiple times before exploding. Afterwards, your gauge will be consumed and you'll have to reload to get it back. Now the WYRMSTAKE is a great combo finisher, so make sure to utilize it when you're coming to the end of a combo string. Now remember as well that the WYRMSTAKE cannon can't be reloaded with the quick reload, it must be reloaded with the normal reload, so that's just R2 and circle on its own. But anyway, let's move on to talk about the useful combos for the Gunlance. Now a lot of the Gunlance combos can be intertwined with one another. Different combos can move into other combos with just a touch of a button. Also thanks to the step move, shelling attacks and quick reload, it means that you can pretty much reset your combos on the fly to keep them going indefinitely should a monster let you. Anyway, the first combo is the lateral thrust combo. This is done simply by pressing triangle, 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 and then pressing X, step back, and then you go into triangle, triangle, triangle again. You can rinse and repeat this as much as you want, or replace the X with a shelling attack with circle. Next is the guard thrust combo, which is done by holding R2 and then pressing triangle, 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 then press circle for a shelling attack, and then go back into triangle, triangle, triangle again. This is quite a defensive combo, but it does route you to the spot. Next is the rise and slash combo, which is done by pressing triangle and circle. This is then followed up by pressing triangle for an overhead smash. You then press circle to perform your burst fire and load in all of your shells onto a monster at once. You then go into the wide sweep with triangle, afterwards go into the quick reload with R2 and circle, then go back into rise and slash with triangle, then overhead smash again with triangle, burst fire with circle, then wide sweep again with another triangle, then your quick reload again with R2 and circle, rinse and repeat over and over as long as the monster will let you. Now you can augment this combo slightly if you wanted to. For example, you could add a lunging thrust at the start of the combo, so that would be a direction and triangle, or if you know you come to a point where you need to either sharpen your weapon again or the monster is going to move away, then following the burst fire or the wide sweep, press circle on its own to perform the WYRMSTAKE attack on the monster. This will pretty much finish the combo though. A shorter alternative combo that doesn't utilize shelling would be rise and slash with triangle and circle, overhead smash with triangle, then wide sweep with another triangle, then quick reload with R2 and circle. You can then repeat this and add shelling in as you see fit. A quicker version of your high damage combo would be to start with a lunging up thrust, or a rise and slash with triangle and circle, then go for your overhead smash, burst fire with circle, triangle for a wide swing, quick reload with R2 and circle, then press triangle and circle again to go into the overhead smash, circle for a burst fire, triangle again for a wide sweep, then quick reload with R2 and circle, rinse and repeat. But anyway, let's move on to talk about the aerial and environmental moves of the Gunlance. Now surprisingly, the Gunlance does come with quite a few aerial moves. First is the jumping thrust, which is done mid-air by pressing triangle. This can then be followed up by other moves and combos. You have the jumping reload smash, which can only be done when your shells are not fully loaded. Now this is done mid-air by pressing R2. You then have your jumping smash, which is done mid-air by pressing R2 so long as all your shells are loaded. The lunging up thrust also comes in useful for aerial moves. For example, you can perform the lunging up thrust into a wall or kickoff spot, which will allow you to run up the wall automatically, or should you be on a slope, perform the lunging up thrust and you'll start sliding down. Anyway, while sliding down a hill, you can perform the sliding guard by holding R2. You can perform the jumping rising slash by pressing triangle while sliding, which can then be followed up by either a jumping thrust with triangle, jumping reload smash, R2, or the highly flashy aerial burst by pressing circle. The aerial burst can then be followed up by pressing triangle or circle again to perform a WYRMSTAKE attack. But anyway, let's move on to talk about the additional tips for the Gunlance. Now unfortunately the Gunlance cannot guard mid-combo, so when committed to a combo, you will be defenseless until it ends and then you can start guarding again. When it comes to shelling attacks, use these to break tougher monster parts, as they won't bounce off a monster's hide. This comes in very helpful, especially if you notice your normal moves are starting to bounce. However, it should be noted that the overhead smash and wide sweep won't actually bounce off a monster's hide, so these are useful basic moves to be aware of. Now whilst the Wyvern's fire is powerful, it is split into multiple hits, so it's not always recommended as a wake-up call for sleeping monsters, as only one of the multiple hits will have that bonus damage applied to it. Be aware with the Gunlance you will be sharpening the blade a lot. This is because shelling attacks do consume your sharpness meter quick, so making use of talents such as protective polish really do help. When it comes to guarding, it will consume your stamina when you block an attack, and you won't be able to gain that stamina back until you drop your guard. However, whilst guarding, if you should spin around on the spot with the left stick whilst guarding, your stamina will start to replenish itself. The Gunlance does have annoyances when it comes to its movement, but this can be alleviated with the various steps. So if you notice you're in a long recover animation, say after performing a lateral thrust free, press X to cancel the animation to help alleviate the slow movement. Lastly, when it comes to shelling attacks, should your sharpness gauge enter the red, then you will no longer be able to use shelling attacks with the Gunlance. So always keep your weapon sharp. But anyway, let's move on to talk about the pros and cons of the Gunlance. Now the biggest pro for the weapon is its shelling attacks. Like I said, these deal fixed damage, so can help guarantee damage on tough monsters. They also have the benefit of not bouncing off a monster's hide, so make it ideal for breaking tough body parts. The next pro is its defensive capabilities. The Gunlance comes with a large shield, and you're able to block a lot of attacks with this, really helping your survivability when using the weapon. And the final major pro is the weapon's long reach. You don't have to be right up close and personal with a monster. Although yes, you still have to be in melee range, you don't have to be touching for the majority of your hits to land. But on the downside, when it comes to the cons, unfortunately the biggest con is the slow movement speed when using the weapon. With the weapon out, you can't roll, so this becomes a problem should you catch on fire, and should a monster be moving between different players, you'll find yourself hopping a lot to try to catch up. And the other major con, unfortunately, is the weapon does eat through sharpness very quickly when compared to other weapons in the game. As I already mentioned, using certain armor skills will help alleviate this, but you will find yourself sharpening the Gunlance a lot more than other weapons. Overall, I found the Gunlance fun to play. Whilst yes, the movement speed issues took a lot of time to get used to, but nonetheless, getting past that, you'll find a weapon that is very strong when it comes to both offense and defense. You're able to take on hunts very quickly, utilizing the various combos this weapon has, as well as the shelling attacks, and other tools in its arsenal. The Wyvern's fire, whilst it hits hard, is not the most useful. It's best used as openers or on trapped monsters, whilst the WYRMSTAKE cannon is best used as a combo finisher. When it comes to defense, the large shield allows you to comfortably take on most monsters' attacks with minimal consequences. Of course, you have to be anticipating a monster's attack, as you can't guard mid-combo. When choosing your Gunlance, you have to take into account your shell types, whether they be long, normal or wide, but nonetheless you should go with what you feel most comfortable with. Now if you're a player who likes to be a tank, someone with strong defences, but doesn't mind too much about having reduced movement, whilst at the same time being able to hit hard and take down monsters quickly, then I can strongly advise the Gunlance. Now remember that the damage numbers and effectiveness of the weapons can vary due to numerous factors from gear, buffs, monster defences to even the environment. All of these can help or hinder a weapon's performance. With that in mind, learning as much as you can about a weapon as possible will help you achieve a successful hunt. Anyway, I hope this video has been informative, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you a hunter's guide to the Gunlance in Monster Hunter World. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.